Welcome everyone to our second virtual artist talk in our new series presented as part of our Epic Women's Directing Project, which focuses on the lives and careers of Canadian women working in theatre. So excited to spend some time today with the amazing Judith Thompson. But before I do, I just have a few notes. First off, I want to acknowledge our season sponsor, Nexicom, for their continued support of Fourth Line Theatre, and Exit Realty LiftLock as our major sponsor, and Supporting Roles Interactive Training Incorporated for being the sponsor of our Epic Women's Directing Project. Thank you all. Just a few housekeeping notes. I want to let you all know that your audio is muted. If you'd like to submit a question to Judith or I, we would be happy to answer those questions during our Q&A session after the talk. To ask a question, simply click on the Q&A button at the bottom menu on your Zoom video window, and you can type the questions and our host will collect them and give them to us during the Q&A. Also, please be aware that if you mistakenly exit the webinar or have any technical difficulties, you can simply re-enter by clicking on the Zoom invite link we sent you earlier today via email, and then you can get right back the same way you arrived. Also, be sure to follow our social media, e-blasts, and visit our website to register for our upcoming virtual events. On May 19th, I'll be spending some time with the fabulous actor, director, and founding member and resident artist of Soul Pepper, Nancy Polk. And on May 26th, I'll be chatting with the wonderful television stage and film actress Fiona Reid, and all of those events will be over Zoom, and they all start at 2:30. You can also visit Fourth Line Theatre's YouTube channel to view all of our virtual events after the live performances and presentations. So now, without any further ado, I would like to introduce and welcome Judith Thompson.
Hello, everybody. Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. You look like you're in a partially sunny room. Are you? Where are you right now?
This is actually where I write. It's a third floor of our house, and it's a sort of combination office dressing room.
So you have your clothes do you mean costumes or your clothing?
No, my clothes, yeah, are like we have a closet over there and closets there, but here's our desks, 2 desks, and a big, beautiful western facing window here.
And your house is in the annex, right, Judith?
It's in Seton Village, which is just west of the annex. So it's west of Bathurst, whereas the annex proper is sort of Bathurst to St. George.
Okay. And how long have you lived in that house, you and your family?
Since my 31-year-old was a baby.
Wow.
So yeah, about 30 years, 29 years, 30 years, yeah.
And you shared space when you say our desks, it's you and your husband, Gregor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we do share it just because the way we work is very different. I like to do my writing in the afternoon and he likes to do his in the morning. And
I was going to ask you about that. So is it sort of after lunch, you've had lunch and then you go up to your third floor and start to write?
Yeah, I like to do sort of business and school business. And if I'm supervising a playwright at the University of Guelph, do that kind of reading in the morning. And then I like to, now in COVID, I go for a 90-minute walk. And then when I finish my walk, around 1:30 or so, I like to then work for the afternoon.
Your dad was a professor. Yeah. Your mom was a professor. She taught drama at Queen's. Your dad was a prof at Queen's. Your brother Bill is a professor of psychology.
Yes.
Was it bound and determined you would end up teaching at university?
Not at all. It was definitely that I would attend university. There was no question of that. But teaching, no, not at all. That wasn't, I feel very lucky that I was eventually offered that. But I was determined to be a theater maker from a very early age, from about 11. And then, what happened was in order to really make a living, I was thankful. I was doing a lot of screenwriting and juggling many projects at once. And it was exciting and I learned a lot from it, but was also, even with the best intentions of people who hired me, I found it kind of disabling or corroding my creative center because they question everything. So you question yourself. You'd say, oh, maybe they're right. That doesn't make sense. And it's not like one good dramaturg. That's very different. It's a kind of questioning that they are the boss. It's their show. You were a writer on it, even if it's a feature film of a play of mine. And So I sort of chose between the two, and I thought I'd much rather share what I know with young people and have that great honor than go on feeling well, sort of, yeah, corroded at the center. So I feel like I was in danger of becoming a hack.
Hmm. Interesting. So the teaching at the university since is it 1992 you started teaching at Guelph?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Over
So that
25
has
years, you know that.
it's given you the freedom to focus on theater primarily, yes?
Exactly, yes. So that I took a few film projects after I started, but not many. And I wasn't desperate for the money, basically. So I was able to focus entirely exactly on theater and my own creative projects because that's what the university supports. That's why I was there. They value what they call my research. So that's what my creating, whether it's writing, directing, just making theater, being part of it. And it's a wonderful job that way.
So you're a writer, you're a director, you started out as an actor. I want to talk to you more about that as well. Which one is it for sure writer is first?
That's first for me, yeah. But I also really love sort of what I do at Rare Theater, the company that I'm artistic director of, the mandate of the company is getting marginalized voices to the stage and them telling their stories in their own words. However, when I direct those, it's highly dramaturgical as well. We're creating it as theater together. It is in their own words, but which words? So there'll be pages and pages of words, but then I help them say, but what do you really want to say?
So crafting, you're doing crafting.
Yeah, a lot, and I love that.
But it's interesting that you say that you wanted to bring marginalized voices to the stage with Rare Theater. Is that not what you've been doing right from the minute you created the character of Teresa in The Crackwalker?
Yes, yes, it is. It's my instinct, but there was something about real people. I wanted to use my privilege. I've had such privilege in this community. It's been so good to me. I thought, it's time to really give back and in any way that I can. And if I could put a real person on stage, they may be an actor, they may not be an actor, and telling the world what they want the world to hear with my dramaturgical assistance to make it theatrically viable and theatrically exciting. Fantastic if I can do that.
Awesome. I want to go back. To the late 50s and into the early 60s. So you're born in Montreal. There's a period of time in Connecticut. Was your dad doing a PhD?
Yes, yeah. Born in Montreal, a couple of years in Kingston. My father was, I think, an adjunct maybe at Queen's. And then he got a job in Connecticut at Wesleyan University. And we wknow there for 10 years. And then we came back to Kingston. He got a position at Queen's, partly because they didn't know how long the Vietnam War was going to go on, and they didn't want my brother to be drafted. He was younger than me, but still, many wars go on for years and years and years. And also because my father was Canadian, and my mother had spent several years in Canada from Australia. And so we went back to Kingston.
So you basically, how old were you when you arrived in Kingston then? Back in Kingston?
Back, just turning 12.
Okay, so it was those formative years, grade 7, 8, and into high school.
That's it, extremely formative. And right away, my mother found the amateur theater, the Domino Theater, which was at that time just a superb amateur theater. As you know, in many small towns, it's just absolute professional level. Many of these people had been in the profession and they had families or whatever. And they did the Crucible, like everybody did the Crucible. Then I was Betty screaming, and pregnant women had to leave the theater because of my screaming, and that was very exciting. And Betty, I want to fly like a bird, and you open it, and then I would sit backstage and listen to the rest of it because I wanted to be there for the curtain call, of course. And just hearing those incredible words by these wonderful actors, including Carolyn Hetherington, which many people know, really tutored me, I think.
So your dad was a geneticist, but he taught psychology. Is that true? I read that.
It's part of psychology, yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And what was it like in the Thompson household? was it very highbrow? Did you have to bring your big girl pants to like put your big girl pants on every dinner? Was it CBC listening? Like, what was it like, the rigor, the intellectual rigor in your household?
Well, I mean, my dad was always reading or marking papers or something like that, and so was my mom. There were a lot of books around. I mean, reading was really encouraged, and yes, we went to classical concerts, all that kind of thing. And but they never pushed us in school. We were never pushed hard. No, you have to get an A, not at all. They just let us find our own levels. I think they didn't believe in pressure, and they knew that when we needed to really apply ourselves and get to where we wanted to be, we would. And that's what happened.
Clearly. Did your brother Bill live in Australia?
He does now. Yeah, yeah. He moved there maybe 8 years ago with his husband, Pat, who's Australian. And he is a prof at Macquarie. And he was a prof at U of T here for many years. And so was his husband. His husband was at OISE.
Oh, wow.
And he was Scarborough, York, and then U of T Scarborough. And yeah.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. So in terms of you as a writer, were you writing from the time you were little? Was it journaling? Like, what was your genesis as an early writer?
Just a lot of reading. I read a lot, constantly reading. I never thought of myself as a writer. I didn't even take playwriting in university. I just, in a way, I think it's because British and American writers were male, especially, mainly 98% male, were so favored, and that's all we studied. I think maybe there was one strange Robertson Davies play that didn't quite work. And so it didn't occur to me. It didn't occur to me till one weekend, till I started writing monologues in theater school. That seemed to work. They seemed to really capture people. And I thought, oh, maybe I can do this.
So it was, went to Queen's. Did you get a degree from Queen's?
Yes, yeah.
In acting, or what was your degree?
Theater, yeah, the drama degree, yeah.
And then you go to NTS, and you're at NTS in the late 70s, right? The school is
Yeah,
about.
so Queen's was 73 to 76, and NTS was 76 to 79.
So did you imagine, and I don't know if your brain was working that way, you were going to be an actress? Is that what you thought was going to happen?
Yeah.
And then everybody's writing monologues at NTS for themselves to perform?
Well, not everybody was, but we were doing Mask with a wonderful, wonderful teacher, the best one there, named Pierre Lefebvre, who also taught at Juilliard and also in France. And that's where I really felt alive in that class. And I was looking he said, now find a monologue for your character, the character you've created out of from a text. And I couldn't find any that were right. And so I decided just to write my own. And that took off. And then we would do performances for each other on Friday nights, just the students. So without the terror of the instructors, watching and assessing us. And again, the writing ignited there. So I performed my own writing, but the writing was really exciting to me.
I wanted to find a quote I have here about what was said about your writing at NTS the first time. I'm just going to look for it here. Do you remember what you quoted here? Can I read this to you? Is this?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So in my final critique at the National Theatre School of Canada some 40 years ago, I won't say who it was, but an instructor who at the time was running the English acting program turned to me and said, we know you've had some success with your little monologues and masked characters here, but do not ever, ever think you can be a playwright. And then you said, oh no, who, me, never. I recited the girl script I'd learned so well, but I had a secret. It was lying in a pile with the dust bunnies under my bed on Rue Clark, and I was adding to it every day. It was the crack walker.
Exactly, yeah.
So you had taken a character that, the character of Teresa, and how does a monologue in a mass class become that play, that really seminal play for you, obviously, but seminal Canadian play?
Well, thank you. And of course, I didn't plan it that way. I think many of these things do happen sort of by accident. One day I just took down my roommate's typewriter. It was a long weekend and everybody was gone and my parents were away or something. So I was all alone, and that was a really good thing, because once you break through the boredom and loneliness, you do something. And I thought, I'm going to make that into a play. And it was so organic. I just thought, okay, let's have Teresa talk to somebody and just make a scene. But of course, I'd been immersed in the theater since I was 11. I played Helen Keller at 11. It had been part of my life. So it wasn't like I had to look up how you write a play. It came fairly naturally, but I would just go, okay, they're going to have some conflict and let it pour out. And I was used to doing these masked characters and channeling voices that were not like my voice. And so there was Sandy, a scene between Teresa and Sandy when Teresa first arrives, and she's been kicked out by Mrs. Bettison, which was very loosely based on an event, just the being kicked out. And then it asserted itself. The story of the death of the baby. Now that is something that happened, but not to Teresa, not to the person Teresa was sort of loosely based on at all. But I thought I was sort of writing a comedy. And then I remember calling somebody and saying, this is something else that's happening here. This is bigger. And I really feel I was just a tool. And the baby asserted himself and said, my life must be written about. This must be known.
And do you remember who the first person was who ever read that first piece, The Crackwalker?
I don't know about the first person, might have been a friend, but Michael Mawson, who was a very beloved teacher there, kind of wonderful guy full of conviction from Kingston too, kind of a wild man, but so passionate about the theater. He is the first one who said, yes, I'm going to make sure this gets produced. Well, no one wanted it. He'd give it to everybody he knew and they'd say, this is the most depressing thing I've ever read. Nobody is going to program this. And finally, Clark Rogers, may he rest in peace, who was at Pass Marais at the time, read it. Actually, Keith Turnbull first did at what was called NDWT, and they did a reading, which was the most thrilling day of my life, besides having children, of course, but professionally, it was unbelievably thrilling. And with a wonderful cast, including Joyce Campion. I can't even remember the others, and then that sort of moved to Pass Marais somehow.
I read something about Clark and Paul Thompson and Pass Marais and the first production of The Crackwalker. And there's a beautiful quote, and maybe I can find it later. After the exhilarating opening night, you and Gregor got on your bikes in the November rain and you rode to get the newspaper and the reviews. Can you talk about, because they weren't, you talk about being panned. Was that the initial response from the reviewers, but you knew that the audience reacted to it? Can you talk about that reaction a bit?
Yeah, and I think it's a really important story to tell to encourage young writers who are also slammed. I mean, what you sense from the audience, that's the right review. That's the response that counts. You can feel it when you're in the audience, and you should go many, many nights. But opening, I knew that something was, very, very exciting here. And people I really respected seemed to feel very positive about it. And so, the next day we went in the pouring rain. And yes, it was an absolute evisceration. And it's interesting because I had that person in a writing workshop about 10, 15 years later. Yeah, I didn't say anything.
So how do you, as a young writer with one play, and how do you go forward and write the next thing with those reviews? Is it really that there's an innate sense in you of self that you knew you, like, I don't know, how do you? So how do you? I don't even want to put into your mouth words.
It's not that it didn't feel like a punch in the face. It did. Of course, I was young, especially when you're young. And it was shocking too after the response. But I just started working on White Biting Dog. I think partly I wanted something very different. I didn't want people to pigeonhole me as writing about only a certain community, for instance. And so White Biting Dog was more magic realist and more middle class characters generally, and just very different. And Urjo Correda called me up when I had written it or was writing it, and he said, I want to do it, and come in and you can have an office for life. And it was an incredible, incredible honor. Yeah.
So let me hear, here's what you wrote, and then I want to talk about you and Urjo and Tarragon. I was bruised, yes, but not broken. The wild enthusiasm of the people I revered in our theater community gave me the confidence and strength to keep writing. They were hungry for the raw writing, for our stages to be full of people nobody wanted to see. We all believed that not only should they be seen, but once they were seen, they would be loved. We all believed that not only should they be seen, oh yeah, but they would be loved, right? Yes. So I'm so interested in that because I was wondering what your life was like growing up, because it seems like so much of your work turns over the rock and the stuff that's underneath, or the people that are hidden away or on the or in the alleyways, and you kind of poke at those people or bring them to life. So I was curious, like, where does that interest in those forgotten people, those invisible people come from?
That's a good question. It's just instinctive. And I knew that there was, I mean, there were certain, I had experiences of being marginalized myself, but I still, now I understand also, you know, I also had privilege of bouncing back from that. And um, I think it's just instinct. I was always drawn to that. And I know I never saw it. I mean, especially in the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s in theater, everybody wanted to see their betters, people who looked better, who spoke better, who lived better. The whole Noel Coward kind of theater.
Yeah.
I mean, there's wonderful things about Noel Coward, but it's that kind of thing. And I thought, I fell in love, for instance, when I worked as an assistant to a social worker after my second year of NTS in Kingston. I just relished being with that community of people who were deemed permanently unemployable. I saw, in fact, how smart they were, how the delicious use of language and ownership of words and language that was unlike what I'd heard, because our language in the middle class, we're homogenized by education. So that whatever was utterly unique about the way we use language when we were kids, and that's what part of why children are so wonderful, the way they use language, that disappeared. It's flattened and erased in most middle class people. Whereas this community, they each spoke in the most delicious, unique kind of way. And so I was just riveted. And then I also saw the challenges that they lived with, and how sort of institutional or sort of government policies that were intended to be very freeing and respectful, such as the reintegration of people into the community who'd been in hospitals for the mentally ill, can go so terribly wrong if people aren't cared for and there's no proper follow-up. And
Interesting. So Urjo would have seen the Crack Walker and then
yeah,
invited you to Paragon and gave you an
yeah,
office.
yeah.
And how many plays did you end up doing there? And how long was that association with him and the theater?
White Biting Dog, I Am Yours, Lion in the Streets, My Big Disaster Sled.
What?
Yeah, it's a big car crash of a play, but there are good things in it. But I wish he hadn't let me put it on. But and after that, Perfect Pie. And then I did Habitat at, as you know, at Canadian Stage.
Yeah. And can I, is it okay to
Yeah,
ask
yeah.
why? Why did
What?
I want to ask about Urjo and you and dramaturgy, but
Yeah.
why did you leave Tarragon with Habitat, or at that time?
Well, frankly, because I, you know, they offered me a nice commission, and I had children. I wasn't at the university yet. I had children to support, and I hardly got anything at Tarragon, just the 10% of the box office, and yeah, it's necessity. And it was fun to have a big stage and to see if I could fill it, and you know.
So that's when I first met you. That's
Yeah,
2001, and
yeah.
I was doing PR then, and I of course, I think I got for interviews for you. I got the cover of the cover of the Globe Arts section in the days when those things really mattered, and
Yeah.
I thought you got that for that was like only the second show I worked on at Canadian Stage, and I thought you got that for everyone. Like I knew who you were, and I knew you were a big deal, but then it was like the next show when it was hard to get them to even return my calls. I was like, oh, she's a big deal.
No, I thought you were pretty great at your job. You were amazing.
I had fun doing that.
Yeah.
Talk to me about Urjo and I guess Iris Turcotte as well, God rest both their souls, and dramaturgy and the good, the bad, and the ugly of it for you and your work.
Yeah, it's tricky. I think the best dramaturgists, I think first drafts, you can't have your censors on. You need to just go so that you are serving something greater than yourself and your own ego. That some sort of synchronicity, some sort of universal art impulse is coming through you that needs to come at this time, and you scramble to serve it. And now often you'll make mistakes because of that. Time, sequences, wrong names, things that don't quite make sense because you're in the dark and you're using the craft that you know and the art that you have. And a good dramaturg will say, there actually, I think you were trying to please the audience. You veered off to the left because you thought the audience wouldn't like what you were doing, and they'll see that and get you back. And that would be me getting in my own way. And a good dramaturg would get me back on track and say, just follow what you were doing. And also you called her, Patsy here, and you called her Jane there.
Right.
Who is she? And you said it was 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning here, and it's the middle of the night. So all that's really helpful because I can't have that hat on while I'm writing, or it will ruin the intuitive nature of it.
And you talked about how the characters kind of just flow out of you, but I'm curious, as you write, because you're an actor as well, do you get up and read? Like how do you hear it for yourself?
Well, mostly not. I will like mutter it out loud just to see if it flows, because it's so interesting. I mean, in a play, you lead with dialogue. It's all dialogue. And I've written for film, and I'm writing fiction now, and it's really interesting the difference that to write something that is dialogue only, and so much of our dialogue is lies or evasion, and it's about the subtext that then the actor will see that, and then director will see the clues to the subtext and experience it. So I've gone away from the question. What was your question?
I don't even remember now too. So, about whether you get up and actually.
Oh yeah. So I will just mutter to myself to see that it flows, because the rhythm does have to be, it's all about rhythm. I find with a lot of young playwrights, they'll write the way we actually talk, and that's great. That's very difficult to do. But when we talk, if I just filmed you and I meeting for lunch or something, even though we're excited and good talkers, it would be dead boring to listen to for anybody. So we have to.
We have to have something underneath us, like an affair that we're not talking about or something.
Because otherwise we jump and it's about bonding, but it's not about, if you don't give me this, I'm going to die.
How were Urjo and Iris different as dramaturges? And for you, what did you like? Like what positives from each of them do you think you got?
Urjo, as everybody will tell you, wrote the most extraordinary letters. Like, I will be a slave of this play until I die. Like, I think nothing can ever match that. It's like, hey, I didn't get a letter. Because you actually get accustomed to these. And he meant everyone. He did for everybody. So he would love what he loved, but he'd be quite delicate. He'd just say, you see here on page 6, it just doesn't make sense. Or he once would say, he'd say, where are the jokes? Every play has to have humor. Yeah, just little things like that. Now, Iris was a lot more hands-on. And she was such a powerful personality and so much fun to spend time with. It got to be quite difficult to disagree with her. I'd have to sort of go back, have some space, and then come back and say, I'm sorry, I am actually going to keep that the way it is, or And she said, okay, no, I know that it's right because I can see in your body. Your body's just relaxed and you know. Yeah, she was fun because who else cares so much, you know? She cared so much. She was an artist herself. She was an amazing visual artist, painter.
Yeah.
And what incredible generosity to give that much to so many writers. And it's not her play. Amazing. And so many of us depended on her.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. You started with monologues, and monologue plays a huge part in all of your work. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. You know, and I had a writer that I was supervising, an MFA writer, who said, well, I've been told that monologues are the worst. They're just terrible in plays, to never write one. Like, who told you that? Monologues, where the poetry of the unique voice can come through. It's where the subtext, the real thoughts can come through, and they only work in plays. And yeah, I think they're magnificent ways of finding a character's true voice, their unconscious.
Well, Shakespeare, and you have a love affair with Shakespeare and a little bit of a fascination with Freud as well. Would that be true?
Well, I mean, Freud did untold damage. He didn't understand women at all. But I do love the idea of his interpretation of dreams and the unconscious, the id. And that's what we're working with, is the id, and the separation of the superego, society, the ego, or, well, selfish little, was I good enough? Do people like all that horror? And then the unconscious, which is what we all work with and love, I think, and revel in.
Yeah, for sure. So then I want to ask, I'm trying to think which question to ask next. Okay, I'll ask about monologues. And one of your, not your biggest successes, it's the wrong way to say it, but you won the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, which is an international playwriting prize. You were the first Canadian to ever win it, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And you won it for a play of 3 monologues.
Yes, that's true. Palace of the End, yeah.
And so tell me where that play springs out of. I mean, obviously the Iraq War, I understand that, but where do those 3 characters come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was a monthly event called the Wrecking Ball, like sort of cabaret. I don't know if you remember, in Toronto. Wonderful thing, because they got some sort of grant for it. So somebody would call you and say, pull a monologue from the headlines. It was always political.
Okay.
We'll cast it and we'll work on it for a few days to a week. Maybe you have a week to write it. We have a week to rehearse it. And then it goes up. And it was always packed. And I've done a few of them. They're really fun. But I'd never written something boldly taken from the headlines at all. It had been very sort of emotional, character-based drama. And so I thought, who interests me right now? And it was Lindy England, the private reservist, who was depicted with their thumb out in front of tortured Iraqi detainees with the hoods on in a pyramid.
This is the one in Abu Ghraib prison?
That's right,
okay.
Abu Ghraib. And she was convicted of torturing them. And I just thought, what's going on? She's a 22-year-old kid. Clearly, this was all ordered by the Pentagon, by her superiors, and she is taking the fall. She's the scapegoat. What's going on with her? So I just looked her up on the internet and stumbled on forums, because I'm not tech savvy at all. And what they were saying about her was so misogynist, and it had nothing to do with sympathy for the Iraqi detainees at all. It was so vulgar, and it was all about the fact that they found her not an attractive woman, and used language so denigrating, so disgusting. I was really fascinated by what that is, and who she was, and who she was trying to please, being someone who had never been thought of or perceived as attractive. And coming from where she came from, West Virginia, poor.
I mean, in the US, for so many poor people, the military is the way out-ish, right?
Right, exactly. And if you're a woman, if you're beautiful, that's a way out. You could step up in class, marry someone a bit wealthier. And if you're not, yeah, what do you do?
So then with Palace of the End, there's the other 2 monologues, which is the Iraqi mother, and then the British scientist who was he kill himself?
Well, I don't think he did, but the report, what was it called? I can't remember. I read it. I read the whole report, but it was after his death. There was a report, and although 3 coroners had said he didn't kill himself, they decided that he did, and his family has accepted that. So who am I to say any different? But from all the reading I did, I don't think he did. I think it was MI6 or some,
Oh, okay.
because he'd been to Iraq 37 times. He was an inspector of nuclear arms. There was no buildup. Saddam Hussein did not have what Tony Blair said that he did. There was no threat
Right.
at all. And all the scientists knew this and told him that again and again. And he got so frustrated and so pained by all the suffering that he saw after the attack of people trying to drive away in their cars. Just imagine us going on the 401 and being bombed, and unbelievable suffering. He went on a show it's a BBC show called Today, and said, no, there was no nuclear arm buildup at all. It was all a lie that the British government lied to you. And he was investigated, and he was a very shy man, and he had to appear before these sort of, I don't know what you call these sort of courts, because looking into whether he committed treason of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrifying for him. You could hardly hear him. And they say that he went for a walk in the woods, and he took something like 3 of his wife's, so an equivalent of naproxen, right? So not a heavy drug, and
for menstruation.
yeah, and slit his wrists apparently in the wrong way, like the way that the blood doesn't all come out. I don't know which way it is, which way is the wrong way, but yeah, and that was found against, and his body had been moved. Anyway, I thought, I want to hear from him, a truth teller, this shy man who was put through this. There's a mystery at heart. And then when I finished him, I thought, I need to hear from an Iraqi woman. What do I know? Luckily, my neighbor is Iraqi. They are an Iraqi family. And the woman took me in one day and talked. We talked for hours, and she talked. And she read an account of the torture of the woman and child. The woman her husband was the head of the Communist Party, which was the only feasible opposition to Saddam Hussein at the time. And yeah, she just read it to me. She translated from the Arabic. I didn't write anything down. I went home. I was catching a plane, I think, in 3 hours, and just wrote that monologue.
Really?
Yeah, it just needed to be done.
That's a lot of pain and suffering you talk about for 3 characters, right? And the circumstances. And so where does all that live inside of you, or how do you let it go or walk with that trauma and pain that you write about so much?
I think the writing about it is the catharsis.
So when you've written and you
Yeah.
stand up at the desk in the 3rd floor room, and you walk down the stairs to make dinner or have dinner or be with the family, it's left there?
It's gone. Yeah. It's gone.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I want to ask you now about directors. And the reason I want to ask you about that is that there must have been a point at which or maybe you always have been, you're a very strong playwright. So in the room because I've directed now a show of yours, you know what you want, and you know how you want it done. I mean, not that you're not a generous collaborator, but I was thinking about your play Capture Me, which is, I think, one of the first things I saw that you directed. And I wondered if it was a response to bad direction of your work, or if you always had that innate desire of wanting to direct in you.
I directed a lot before that. I directed Lion in the Streets in 1990, and I directed the Hedda at Shaw right after that.
Okay.
I don't think I directed a lot before the Lion in the Streets, but I certainly worked very closely with the directors because I've been immersed in theater all my life. So, and yes, and I do appreciate the art of directing very much. And I know I'm a big pain in the ass in the room, but I feel like I owe it to the play to make sure the premiere production is right, is what I envision. And then I got, like, you gave me so much, you gave the play so much. I never imagined we'd have children and trucks and, like, wow. And none of that would have been there without you. And yet, yes, you had a strong enough ego and a generosity to ask me after every scene, do you have anything to say? Which I've never experienced before.
Interesting. Well, it's interesting that because I'm thinking of you and Brad Fraser and George Walker, a few of the really premier playwrights who were struggling for a period, or I thought were in the mid 90s into the 2000s, with directors who would take their plays and go off half cocked. And I say that like really loosely. Has that happened to you with your plays, that you're like, what have they done? Or they don't understand, they're not honoring the words? Like, I'm just curious about you and directors.
Not here, not, I mean, I don't see all the productions, obviously. I remember there's a Line in the Streets has been in rep in Poland forever. And I really like this director. He also made a movie of I Am Yours, a Polish movie. But he said, oh yes, it's 3 hours. I've made 3 magnificent hours or something. And oh my God, when I directed, it was 2 hours minus the 15-minute intermission. So it was an hour 45. What are you doing? But they like to, put their images and their hand all over it. And that's wonderful. I mean, no, I'm lucky that I've never actually gone to see something that's just horrible.
Right. Well, that's good. I think the reason I was asking was I saw Edward Albee at the Jane Mallet. I forget who was
I saw that. Yeah.
And do you remember him talking about a Japanese production of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, done on a black and white stage? They were moved around like like chess pieces. And they put him in the front row, and he hated the interpretation. He just wanted to turn around and tell everyone to leave the theater. I just always remember him saying that and thinking, it's that balance as a director between having a vision for it yourself, honoring the text.
Yeah. No,
I
want a director with a vision. I really do. As long as they honor the text. Yeah. And mine isn't necessarily the strongest. It's right, but it's not necessarily the I've seen incredible sort of French productions and Spanish ones. There's recently a Brazilian one that had to close at COVID, but where they've just imagined with their set designer in extraordinary ways. And that's really, really exciting to me.
Is it interesting to see productions in other countries of your work? Because your plays are so quintessentially Canadian in many, many ways. I mean, the Crackwalker is Kingston. I mean, I know it's lots of other places too, but is it interesting to see your plays done internationally and to see the culture, their culture imposed on the work, or their culture informing your work?
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's really an honor, because so much of what a play is the language. And when you translate, you're going to lose about a third of what it is. And so I think, okay, so it's lost a third inevitably. Even if it's a brilliant translator, it's just not going to be like the idiom. Crackwalker is so idiomatic. And some cultures, some languages they don't quite have that, not in the same way.
Yeah.
And also idiomatic phrases, some of them can't be translated. I remember, actually, I did a sort of adaptation of a Quebecois play called Motel Hélène at Tarragon. And yet they had phrases when you translate it directly from the French. It was like, I feel like a worm in the middle of a desert. It's like, yeah, I get what that means, but it doesn't work in English.
Yeah.
So do I say I feel like shit? Do I say, like, that doesn't quite do it? You have to really think about, how do I translate that and make it mean exactly the same thing?
That's so interesting. I want to ask you about, I have so many things to ask you, but I will get to them all. When you directed the Crackwalker, was it in 2016? Was that?
Oh, yeah.
At Factory?
Yeah.
I am curious about what it was like. I mean, it is in some ways, a sacred Canadian text. But revisiting it, what was it like for you? Because you have such a sense of social justice. I know you're very sensitive to appropriation now. So I'm just curious, what was it like to look at your text again?
Oh, it was such a gift. And thank you, Nina, because it's maybe sacred, but there were problems with it. And the problem was the man, whose character called the man, who there are a couple of references in the words to the man being an Indigenous man. And when I wrote it, when I was just 25, it was just something that had happened to me on the street. And I just, none of that was on my radar. I wasn't awake yet in that sense. And so I understood that. And I had the great privilege of working with Yolanda Bonnell and Wabate Fabister, who were my consultants, as well as actors, performers. And I understood the play in a way that I never had before. That, and so I was able to understand what the man was, what the crack walker really is. It's not just some poor homeless guy in the street we're afraid of, or people would say the boogeyman. What is the boogeyman? It is our extraordinary oppression of Indigenous people, the settlers' invasion, the murder, the massacre that's still going on, of course, every day, murdered and missing Indigenous women. And so the crack walker is a look at who's lowest on the pole in settler culture, and then who do they look down, like who do they want to destroy?
Right.
Well, yeah. And so that's what I wanted to explore with the help of Yolanda and Wawate, and it was a wonderful, wonderful time.
So much of your writing, it seems like poetry, and especially your more and more recent writing. Would you agree with that, first of all, that it has a structure and feel of poetry?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm drawn to organic poetry of the human voice. And that's why certain turns of phrase or the way certain people speak, as I said, a lot of marginalized people have created their own language. And so I'm just like riveted to it and engaged with it. And that's what I want in a play. I'm not really interested very much in plays where it's just what I hear around me, unless someone can take what is poetic and rhythmic. I mean, poetry is rhythmic. All poetry, all good poetry is rhythm, as a music, and finding the music of the human voice, which only happens when we're emotionally engaged. When we're bored with each other, there's no rhythm.
Yeah. And your work has a rhythm, right? It has an innate rhythm that has to be honored, right?
Yeah. If that rhythm's not there, I mean, don't you find if people are arguing, this extraordinary rhythm comes out? I said, what? I did not say that. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. It's beautiful kind of rhythm. But if two people are a bit bored with each other, it just dies. Yeah.
Well, I think you might hear the rhythm being you more than I might hear the rhythm. When you say it, I go, oh, yes, of course, there's a rhythm to it. Do you, like when you're out on the street, when you're on the transit, and in the before time when people went on transit, would you write down things you heard, or are you like?
No, but it's an exercise I like to give students, to just use your ear as a tape recorder. And yeah, you can write it down, but I think what you remember is what will work for you.
So you had not acted for a long time, and then you wrote a play called Watching Glory Die. Was it your idea to act in it?
No, I didn't want to at all. Iris made me.
Really?
She said, you are writing for actors, you're teaching acting, and you get on that stage and see what it's like again. And you know, you're good at this, and now you're going to do it. And I'm like, oh no, I don't think so. It's been way too long. I wouldn't even know. It's like the question we all laugh at when audiences ask, how do you memorize all those lines? I was like, how do you memorize all those lines? And she made me, and I thought, no, you're right. Who am I to direct actors, to teach actors, to write for actors, if I don't even remember what it's like? And so it was terrifying, was exhausting, physically exhausting. And I really never want to do it again. But although I have a little fantasy of always writing a tiny little part for myself with like one line, just so I can be there backstage, just feel it.
We talked about that. Do you remember with Snow White? For a minute, you were going to maybe be the mother of the
That's
two
right.
of Pratt and Dodge. Yes.
And then I thought, oh, I'd rather sit by the river.
So talk to me about Watching Glory Die. Tell me where the idea for that play comes from.
I was working with Iris. They have a factory, a program of new work. I can't remember. They've gone through several names. And she said, what are you interested in? I said, I don't really know what to write right now. And she said, well, what's bothering you? What's haunting you? And I said, Ashley Smith, a young girl, 19-year-old girl who killed herself, strangled herself with a ligature with 6 correctional officers watching because they'd been instructed not to go in till she was blue. And she was 19 and she was only in for throwing crab apples at a postman because that's a form of treason because a postman works for our government. Can you believe it?
I had no idea.
Yeah. And that was my outrage. And I wrote it in monologues. Ashley, who was called Glory in my play, it was based on her. Of course, we called her mother. Her mother very much wanted the play to be done and wanted her story told. And a correctional officer. I grew up in Kingston with 9 prisons, so there were a lot of kids of correctional officers I knew, and it would be generational. It would be in families, and her mother, yeah, the 3 of them.
And who directed that one?
See, Iris directed the workshop, and she was a very good director too.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And Ken Gass.
Oh, it was Ken, because it was part of the Canadian rep.
That's right, with Nikki Guadagni helping. I knew that she's so amazing with movement. She'd tell me things like, do you know, Judith, that you are closing your eyes through that whole? I said, I am not. And I go, yes, I guess I am. Because fear of the audience. I didn't want to see people I knew. Actors develop a sort of scrim so that even if they see people they know, it just can't throw them off. But I hadn't done this in so long, it would just alienate me to see someone staring at me 5 inches away from my face.
God forbid they're eating like chips or something.
Or laughing, or, stop laughing, I'm concentrating. No, you can't. But yeah, all that was really quite something. Actors just revere them for what they do.
Me too. So my experience with you is with Who Killed Snow White. So I'm curious if this is the way you are all the time, but you are merciless with your own work in terms of edits and editing. So everyone knows that on the first reading at the farm of Who Killed Snow White in 2018, that night you went home and wrote basically a second draft, second draft. Yes.
Did I?
Yes, because stage management had to be in at 7 a.m, photocopying all new drafts. Are you always so merciless or so sweeping with your edits?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of what the writing I do is because I've been a sort of creature of the theater for so long in the rehearsal room, responding to the actors that we have, the director that we have, all that, and realizing and from hearing it, what's right, what's wrong, also what's too long, all that. Yeah, I'm very responsive to what's live.
Do you write for the people who are acting it in that moment?
Yeah, because I just want it to be the best show it could be then. Yeah.
So interesting. It's so interesting.
If an actor's funny, I write it funnier. If they're not,
Right.
Yeah.
It was interesting with that one. Maya's sort of similar to you, Maya Ardle. She can be quite merciless with her writing. And both of you are like, I'll say something about a sentence, I'm confused. And you're like, you're right. That whole scene doesn't work, doesn't it? I was like, whoa, no, I was talking about a sentence. You're like, no, that scene doesn't work. And, but it's so interesting to work on world premieres. It's basically all I know and all I've ever done is there's no roadmap, for it. And I know that in Who Killed Snow White, we had the wonderful Cynthia Ashberger playing the mother and of the young girl. And do you remember, I don't know if it was we must have been in tech. You removed all of the mother's monologues from the first act.
I did?
Yeah, we didn't think they were working. You and I, you called me or I called you, and we were like, we agreed, we took them out. Then we watched a run of it, and then we looked at each other and said, they all have to go back in.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Wow.
And she was
just forgotten that. Yeah, and I know that I, thought, oh, well, this is much more of, it's a naturalistic play. I should cut I'm in blood now. And you said, no, don't cut that. And you were so right. I am so grateful. Sometimes I just go too far.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting. There are other kinds. I think there's two extremes of playwrights. There's the you Maya extreme, and then there's the ones where you want to cut the in the fourth line on the
Yeah. Yeah.
19th page, and you have
Yeah.
to basically write a thesis for the playwright and present it to them about
Right.
cutting the. Then they
Yeah.
say, "Well, I'll go away and think about it," and they invariably come back and say,
Right.
"No, that the is absolutely needed." You're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You have won so many prestigious awards. So 2 governor generals, you've won Chalmers and Doras and the Walter Carson and the Blackburn we talked about. Are you a member of the Order of Canada? What is it?
Officer.
An officer of the Order of
Officer
Canada?
Judith. Yeah.
Do those things matter? What do they mean? Maybe is what I'm asking. What do those kinds of recognitions mean?
Well, one's very grateful for the recognition, but I'm also extremely aware that there are extremely gifted, hardworking people who have not been recognized, and I am abashed about that and embarrassed. And so awards, it's really, of course, it's nice to get them. I won't pretend that it's not, to be honored, but I think it's important to always be aware of all those who have been ignored, whose work has been ignored.
Right. You wrote, and I don't know if it was in relation to SLED, which you talked about earlier as being a bit of not quite working. It was 7 hours, then it became 3 hours.
Yeah.
But there was a line that you or something you were quoted as saying about it, that you were looking at human violence back to its source in your work.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean? Like, what are you saying when you say that? Do you remember? You don't have to remember.
Not really, no. I think it was about the shooting of the character Annie, and they were pretending to think she was a deer, but they didn't. Yeah, I don't really know.
Okay, fair enough.
I just think the problem was that I cut down what should have been a 2-part play,
Right.
and to try to make it into 2 hours and 45, so that was even long for that. But I should have honored, it's when you don't honor your original impulse, everything goes wrong.
Right.
And that's what happened. Yeah.
How has it been, or do you think your career has, can you look at your career as being a woman compared to some of your compatriots who are men, and how it's been different, or is it impossible to look at your career that way?
It's
Would it have
difficult.
been
I mean,
different if you'd been a man?
that's a really good question. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. You're a force of nature. Maybe you have to be a force of nature to have gotten the career you got. Maybe you would be, whatever our version of, you might be Albie if you were a man. Canada's Albie. I don't know how much bigger you would be. I'm just curious about that.
It is a very interesting question. Yeah. I mean, I have had men support me, certainly, but I've also had a lot of being called a ball buster and all sorts of, things. And I know that there's a lot of negativity too, directed at me in my work. I ignore it. I don't see it. I don't read it. But of course there is. Anybody who stands out, who writes work that's fairly extreme, it's going to cause a lot of response, and some of it negative. I know that that's true.
Do you cocoon yourself with your family, with your kids, in your life, so that stuff doesn't sort of hit you, so that it doesn't inform or change your work?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't hear it.
Are you a lifelong feminist?
I actually, to my huge embarrassment, people have brought up something I said at the very beginning of my career. Said, well, it's not feminist theater, it's just theater. I think I just didn't want to be pigeonholed. But certainly in practice, yes. But I did adhere to the girls' script as I was quoted, to be sort of evasive and cheerful to get what I needed. Because there were certain circumstances where you couldn't just say, you're repulsive. You had to sort of dance around to get to where you wanted to go.
Right.
And pretend you didn't hear it, or,
Yeah.
And I think most women have had to do that at some point. But now women are setting up and just saying, I heard what you said and I know what you were implying, and that's not on, and I'm going to tell everybody.
Yeah.
You know, because when we were coming up, when I was coming up, you tell everybody, nobody cared.
Well, you would
Be the
suffer. You would never be hired. I mean, I think that what Me Too taught everyone is that prior to those floodgates opening, I mean, everybody knew about Weinstein. Everybody knew about the other men that we know and that came down. Everybody knew, but you couldn't say anything or you'd never work again. It was as simple as that prior to that.
That is it. Yeah. Yeah. And we're still, you know, we still are cagey and protect people and go, well, I won't name any names, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. But you've always named the names. You've always said the people. You've always, don't you think in your work, you've always held people to be accountable?
Yeah, that is what the work's about. But me personally, I haven't.
Right. Well,
I would tell you if we had lunch together.
yes.
And that's what women have always done, which is great. Whisper.
The network.
No.
Yeah, everybody knew about Gian. I knew about Gian. I knew
Did
about
you?
Harvey Weinstein.
I didn't.
Here,
Did you?
yeah. Yeah, I had read things online from women warning other women. Your life is like, and I guess it's anybody's life over a long enough period, it's like chapters. And I feel like another chapter started in, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious what you think, with Body and Soul.
Yes, that's really when the rare chapter began.
Yeah, so if
No,
you trace to where
yeah.
you are now, I trace it to Body and Soul. Can you tell me about that partnership with Dove and that work?
Yeah, it was, I got a call one day just saying, would you be interested in creating a theater piece with about 14 women who are not, they have to not be actors, and between the ages of 45 and 85, about beauty and aging. And I said, well, if there's no advertising involved, sure, why not? And oh my goodness, there was a huge budget, and they flew women from all over the country, from Nunavut, from northern British Columbia, like everywhere, to interview. And diversity was very important to me. And we chose 14 wonderful, incredible women. And we had two-week workshops where there was a box of Kleenex in the middle, and I would give them prompts, ask questions. And we hired people to transcribe all the answers. And then again, it was a dramaturgical sort of feat to make a play of it, and to say, where do we put 14 women now, on the stage? And, wonderful things like, what is your dream outfit? And then it was created for them, difficult moments in the play. Originally, the advertiser's client, they begged the stage manager to send them a script, and I said, don't, they won't understand it. And she did, and they didn't understand it, and they marched in saying, this is an outrage. I want women to walk away from this show with a bounce in their step about being older. And I go, they will. You don't understand. When you see these women up there, when you see what they've been through and how they've triumphed. And of course, that is what happened. But the
advertisers were afraid of the truth telling. And the truth telling was the key to what would make it important.
Yeah. Some being whipped with dog chains, like horrendous abuse across the board. And people who had no shoes now having 100 pairs and owning 3 salons, and, incredible stories. Very real. And I think I gave 6 minutes to beauty. And it was just a funny bit. I love my shoulders, or, I have great breasts, like whatever. And that was just a fun bit. But it was about so much more. Anyway, that got me really excited about working with untrained people who were natural storytellers and had a natural presence, and in their own words. And that's rare. That's what's unusual about what we do.
But that's what's extraordinary. So your next piece is the piece that was entitled Rare, right? The one
that's right.
The
well, actually, the next piece was a piece called Sick. Right. For Next Stage, which I did with Lauren Brotman and Jack Greenhouse. There was a family member who'd had a chronic illness in my extended family. And I thought, well, there must be a lot of young people out there who have chronic illnesses and which are invisible. And so we auditioned, and there were all, sure enough, many young people from the age of 12 to about 25. And it covered everything. And it was beautiful, beautiful to work on, beautiful show, and filled the houses at Next Stage. And then after that was rare.
Right. So that community-based work, I mean, you have gone from the most pinnacle of professional at NTS as an actor, playwright, across the country working and around the world working with professionals. So interesting that this later part of your work, your professional work and your practice has been community-based work.
Yeah, I think, I think as you said, like that's sort of the first play came from community and from me wanting to reach beyond the borders of the community I grew up in. My ancestors came from Ireland, on the boat, and I've read Mary O'Hara's letters. Oh, they threw another soul off the boat. And I think history is in our bodies. And I do think that my reaching out beyond the borders of my middle class existence was about history being in my body.
It's interesting. It was a revelatory moment because my whole career has been community-based work at Fourth Line.
Right.
But when we did the round table feedback with the company, and we had 17 or 21 young people in who killed Snow White at Fourth Line, right? Ranging in age from 9 to 21. When they went around the table and each of them talked about the pain that they had lived with of bullying and harassment and all of the things from little Lev, who was 9 at the time, all the way up to the older people, and men and women. Were you as blown away by that as I was?
Yes, and not surprised, but blown away, because I've heard it in my classes. The classes that I teach, I often begin with asking them to tell, if they wish, a true story, just to show them that they have the stories already. They already know how to tell a story perfectly. So moving, and there's nothing like authenticity. And yeah, I was absolutely blown away. And I think that you asking them to do that was a great way of engaging them with the material, saying, yeah, I have a personal stake in this.
And those kids did. I mean, the adults did too. It was one of the most special companies that I've ever worked with at Fourth Line. And I've worked with amazing companies, but what they created, their bravery, their willingness to tell the truth in that play.
I mean, and the fact that you managed it, and people say, what, you had children with that, that material? And yes, but you managed to keep them separate from the difficult material somehow.
But we scrambled. That first reading we did, they were all there together, and you looked at me and I was like, oh, this is bad. And then we made the OCO, the older company, and the YOCO, the younger company, and we split them up. And I remember a few parents reaching out, a little concerned about the younger kids. My daughter was in it, right? And she was, I don't know, what would she have been, 12 then?
Yeah.
And we got real clear real fast that the little guys were not going to be in some of the sexual assault scenes or ever even being around that work.
You can see it, yeah.
We made it up as we went pretty quickly in those first couple of days.
So I think they were pretty protected.
They were. I think so too. Would you read something for me, or a couple of things to indulge me, Judith?
Sure. What's the mood? What would you like to hear?
Mood is whatever you want to. I'd love you to read something from Who Killed Snow White eventually, but
okay.
Something else.
Why don't I read from I Am Yours, an early play. Okay. It's just a funny monologue.
Yay.
This is Peg's. She's the mother of Toy. And it's a play about class, and it's a play about childbirth. And when they did it at the Royal Court in London, it was played for pure comedy, the whole thing. And I had thought of it as there are funny parts, but I mean, a baby is stolen, and it's real class warfare. So interesting, speaking about how a director can perceive. So this is Peg's talking to a taxi driver. after having real issues with her grown son. Your children are only loaned to you. That's what Muriel says. They're only loaned to you for a short time. It comes as quite a shock to us, us girls who've been brought up to think family's our whole life, and you grow up and you get married and you start having kids and you are in your prime, man. Everyone on the street smiles. They respect you. You're the most powerful thing there is, a mother with young kids. And the kids think you're Christmas. They want to sit on your knee and help you bake cookies. Mom this, mom that. And you're tired as hell, but you're having the time of your life, right? You're important. You're an important member of society. Kids all around you, friends' kids, sisters' kids, carpools, round robin, you're having a ball. And then they get older. You go back to work and it's their friends. Their friends are more important than you, than anything in the world. You couldn't drag them out on a picnic for $1 million. It seems they only talk to you if it's to get money or the car. They whip through their meals in about 10 seconds flat. Something took you 5 hours of buying and chopping and mixing and cooking, and then they leave the house. And you never see them. And you wonder if they hate you. You know they're only there because of the money thing. They'd be gone in a second if there was a chance. Why is that? Why don't they like you anymore? I tried, I tried like hell to listen to the AC/DC and the Led Zeppelin and all that. I even said I liked it. I did like that Stairway to Heaven one. I used to get jokes from the magazines and newspapers, a mom with a sense of humor. That went over like a lead balloon. I drive him to his parties, his roller skating, his hockey, his baseball. We go the whole drive silent, not a single word. Only word was at the end, pick me up at 8 o'clock. What happened? What happened to the baby who looked up at me with eyes when the doctor first showed him to me? Blackberry eyes. The baby I must have walked 10 miles a day in our little apartment, back and forth, eyes closing, looking at me. Why is it that look goes away? And that's Peg's.
Did you write that before you had your kids?
No, I'd had one and I was pregnant with the second.
But you didn't know that you'd lose their adoration when you wrote that piece.
No, I guess I didn't. No, I didn't. No. But I could, maybe I'd talk to people or.
Huh. Interesting. It's very interesting. It's beautiful. It's beautiful and fun.
I mean, the adoration's still there, but it's very hidden. It can be very hidden. In some, I guess it does go, I guess in some.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What else have you done there?
Well, how's our time? Should I go right to Who Killed Snow White, or what would you like?
Sure, do you want to do some do you want to do some Who Killed Snow White, and then we'll take some questions and we'll see where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
So I can do, there's the Clique Monologue at the end, and there's Ramona, is this hand real, this blood, my voice. Would you want both or one?
Yeah,
or
do both.
Okay.
I'll indulge myself.
Okay.
I'm sitting around on a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay. I mean, when Cynthia does it, it's just huge, wonderful Greek, so I can't do that right now, but I can't do that ever. No one can do what she does. So Ramona, the mother of Serena, who has missing and possibly gone and killed herself after horrendous sexual assault followed by cyber assault, has been thinking about revenge. It's the middle of the night. Ramona finds herself in the water. Is this hand real? This blood? My voice? Am I in the middle of the woods, in the middle of the night, all alone with blood? Blood on my hands? This isn't me. This can't be happening. It can't be true. I'm dreaming. Of course I am. Yes. So I can wake up at any time. But where am I? Where am I? Why would I be standing in the river in the night? Oh, yes, I know it now. I am the Furies. The Avengers. I am all of them, all 2,000 of them inside me, the power of all of them. I am the Furies. Watch out for me, boys. Watch out for me. Oh, yes, I tore them apart with my teeth. My hand was the axe we chopped on our Christmas tree with every year, the axe he chops the firewood with. I am in blood now. I am standing in their blood. I am wading in their blood. There is no turning back. She wakes from the dream. She's outside on the ground. She speaks to the audience. Oh, yeah. Yes, the dream again. The revenge dream. It's a different revenge every night. Some nights I cut their heads off. Some nights I feed them to dogs. Some nights I hang them from the highest trees. Look, I'm sleepwalking. I haven't done that since I was a child and my mother died. Here I am on the cold ground. I need to find my child. I need to make it better. Will this blood on my hands make it better? I need to find my child. Is she lost? Tell me, is she lost forever? And that's Ramona.
Before you read the Clique monologue, I'm just curious, where does that monologue come from, Judith?
I think I remember when my children were young, I would have nightmares. I think it's probably not uncommon that they'd gone missing, that they'd been hurt, and their nightmares, as you know, are so real. And we read about all these terrible things over the years of children being hurt. And I remember just waking up in a sweat, like the gratefulness that it wasn't real, the relief so profound, so enormous. And that's where I went in order to write that, writing and theater making is about radical empathy and trying. Of course, I could only find a sliver of what a mother or father, a person must go through when their child has either ended their own life or been killed. But to find that sliver, that empathy as a mother and the feeling of the revenge you would want.
Yeah.
Let's
Because
be
what's
honest about it.
interesting in the piece is what you talk about is the relief of waking up from the dream that and then we go, oh no, she's okay. Yes, she's breathing.
Yeah.
They're there. This Ramona wakes up in that moment. And of course the nightmare is real.
It's real. It's real. And how awful that must be. And people talk in interviews about that, about they sleep and before they're really awake, they think, they don't think it, but they have the feeling of normality. And then it comes back like a wave. Oh yeah, she's died.
Yeah.
He's died, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the only way to write that, is to go to those places as an actor does when they see the text and has to do.
Great, thank you. And you're going to read the Clique monologue now?
Okay. Yeah. So this is when her daughter Serena, in the play, and we were so it was so great to have an actual pond at Fourth Line, and for her to lie in the pond as if she has drowned herself. We find out later that Ramona says, "Look, she didn't die. This is a play, but this does happen." But so she wakes up because everybody's looking for her. Excuse me. And she tells you why it is a relief to not be alive. I'm here. Here I am. I'm here. But I'm hiding. I'm hiding so they can never find me. I know you'll miss me. I know you'll be angry that I left you this way, but please understand I am not there with you, so I will not be there with them. Because while I was there, a living human girl on a living human earth, I would never be free. I would never be free of what happened. And everyone knew what had happened. Because when I was here with you, they could always, always get to me. And that moment in time, my terrible moment, the most terrible moment of my life, could never disappear. It would always be there, a click away. For anyone who wanted to see, and everyone wanted to see, a click away, a click away, a click away. At university, meet new friends. Click, oh, she's that girl. Wanting to write for the school paper, applying for a job. Click, click, oh no, look at that, my first crush. Click, oh, she's that girl? I don't think so. Applying for scholarships. And then maybe someone does fall in love with me despite it all. And then at my wedding, there'd be a drunken nephew. Click, click, look, everyone, look at the bride on her back. And then imagine my happiest moments. I have my first baby, a new life nursing at my breast. Nasty nurses, click, click, look at the mama back when. Oh yeah, I'll see it in their faces. They're hating faces. No escape, see? No escape ever when I'm watching my daughter at soccer, my son at ballet. Click, 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 click. People with their phones, jealous people, nosy people. Click, 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 click. When I'm running for town council, when I'm a grandmother sitting down to dinner with my grandkids. Click, click. Did you see what grandma did 60 years ago? Even on my deathbed. My deathbed. Click, click. The cleaner will look me up and click, click. Do you know what happened to her? Always, always there for all the world to see, a vomiting ghost haunting me. This way, I'll be forgotten. I'll vanish. Vanishing is a beautiful thing. And that's that.
Thank you. Because you have 5 kids and you also have been an educator for a quarter century. Is the cell phone the most challenging new thing, do you think, for them? When you teach, I'm thinking about what it's like to get the kids that you teach to put those machines down. Or
they're really pretty good. And what I
are they?
say, I ask and they have to be warned that. So I ask at the beginning of term that tell me if there's a family issue, of course, keep it on, or a health issue. But otherwise, and it's a lot because it's so much of the work is their work. They are performing for each other. They are reading their work for each other. So it's disrespecting each other, and they're very respectful of their peers, this generation. I really love that. So hasn't been too much of an issue. No.
That's great. That's good. We're going to stop there for now and take some questions. I think Lindy will come on and she will read any question they have. I have other questions I can ask, but we better, I want to be mindful of your time and see if we have any questions.
Hello. Yes, we do. We have a few questions here, and we have had a few comments about how fabulous this has been. So thank you both. The first question is for Judith from Tracy. She asks, the joy of reading and memorizing Judith's monologues is learning the character's speech patterns. Does Judith write in character?
Thank you for your question. I think I do. Yes. Yeah, I think I have to for the rhythms to happen. I become that character as I write my version of it. And yeah.
Great.
Thank you. And from Wesley, how do the names of Judith's plays come about? How do titles emerge?
That's a great question. Yeah, the title's really important to me. Some I take from a phrase in the play that a character has used. Line in the Streets, for instance, I was desperate. It was actually started its life as a radio play called A Great White Light. And then I found Isabel to thread the pieces together. And I looked through the Bible and I found the phrase line in the streets. I thought like there will be a line in the streets, something like that. I thought that's it, line in the streets. That's what the play is about, basically. And so instinctively, I knew that was right. The crack walker came from, that is what people in Kingston called this guy who walked around town all day, walking all day, all night. Yeah. Wow. He looked like he was looking at the cracks. Yeah. Who killed Snow White? Yeah, I was really happy when I thought of that one, because we grew up on fairy tales, girls especially, Snow White, Cinderella, Frozen. you know, and how does that dream die and who kills it?
Thank you.
Oh, and Palace of the End, that is what I thought was a great phrase. Saddam Hussein's palace had been called the Palace of Flowers under the king. And then when Saddam Hussein took over, it became a place of torture. So it was called Palace of the End.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. When I heard that, I thought, oh, yes, that's it. That's the title.
Another question from Sarah. What is Judith's process leading up to beginning to write? So for example, deciding on a beginning, middle, end. Is it an outline process? Is it just starting writing?
I don't usually do an outline, but it's capturing the voice of the protagonist, of the character whose needs are governing the structure of the play. If I can get the voice, and I always know when I haven't, and some plays have gone on and there's one character I never quite got the voice of, and I'm always really irritated by myself when I need to have, this channeling needs to happen.
As you say that, you answered the first question from Tracy about sort of monologues and if you write in character, and she commented after your answer, my question was actually answered as Judith embodied each of those stunning monologues.
Thank you.
And just one last question here from our attendees. Do you have a cure for writer's block?
I think if you have writer's block, it means you shouldn't be writing at that time, that you wait until there's something that you need to write, because I think we can never treat writing like a job. As soon as it's a job, the work will, even if it's a very good play, it will be like a good assignment. I think if you have writer's block, it just means either it's a subject that is very painful to write about, it's very personal, and you might not be ready to write about it. You might be protecting yourself, the block. Otherwise, if you're just thinking, oh, I should write a play, and there's a block, it just means that you don't know what you need to write about yet, and that will appear. Be patient with yourself, and it will unblock when it's something you are ready to write about, or that you desperately need to write about.
So I have two questions based on that then. Have you ever had writer's block?
No. Wow. But sometimes I've been, I mean, it was 7 years between SLED and Lion in the Streets, although I did write a children's play and a lot of radio plays in between. But yeah, because that's when the play came to me. I think you cannot force it. You cannot force art. And that's what hack is. You're a hack writer. And I don't, not to judge them at all. People need to make a living, absolutely. And because you're writing for the dollar, and you have to make a living, and you're told what to write. You're writing for a show, and you're writing for these characters or whatever. But it's not coming from you. Nothing wrong with that. Great way to make a living, learn about structure. But for me, that's.
Do you write every single day, and is it always like, do you do sort of stream of consciousness writing or anything to get yourself going, or do you go right into your material?
Right now, I write every day it's not sunny, because when it's sunny, I want to be out all day in the garden, walking, whatever. Every day it's not sunny. Yeah, I go back to the text and I revisit it, and I often fixing things and filling in rich details. I realized, oh, I forgot that. And very slowly moving it along. And, you know, sometimes if I only write for 20 minutes, but something important happens, that's great. I'm perfectly happy with that.
Does your time riding your bike, walking, taking the bus to school, working in your garden, are you thinking about the plays or the book or the whatever you're writing all the time?
It will just happen, or you know, when a lot of us are lying awake at 5:30 in the morning, stewing about this and that, and suddenly an answer will happen. That's it. And I'll try to hold on to that until I can get to the computer.
Lovely. Lindy, do you have more questions from our lovely audience?
I just have a couple comments. So from Cynthia Ashberger, who you were speaking about, who has
I'm
been
so embarrassed
listening.
you heard me reading that monologue. Oh.
She says, so inspiring, always learning from you, Judith. Thank you, Kim, for the questions.
Oh.
And then Barb just now commented, kudos to Fourth Line for producing Who Killed Snow White. So powerful and a brave choice.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Well, we were lucky that you wrote it. It was interesting when you read the Clique Monologue, because I didn't know this was going to happen, but the audience was 50-50 split on whether Serena should have died at the end of the piece. So half the audience that we heard feedback from strongly were so relieved. Oh my God, I'm so glad you didn't kill her. I'm so glad there was hope at the end. And equally strong, 50% were pissed off a bit at us that we had taken you had made the hopeful choice to bring her to life.
Because so many actually do die.
Yeah, and
Well, I think we made that pretty clear with the naming of the names.
That's right.
That's saying this is a play where it's a beautiful summer night, and we'll give you hope, because some don't go through with it, some do survive.
Yeah.
But the reality is, here's 20 names or more. How many was it?
Yeah.
Whole cast. So yeah. I think that answers it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I believe in the choice. It's just, I was so interesting to see.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I see what I understand both points of view. Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah. I wanted to say, I loved your Hedda, by the way. I saw it at Buddy's, and I don't even know when that was, but I loved that adaptation. And I think, did you direct it too?
No, Ross Manson directed.
Ross directed it, okay.
And in fact, he commissioned it from me. He asked for one of the acts to be in at First World War period, or was it contemporary? It was different from the one at Shaw. Okay. But then the one that we've just published, I went back to the original Shaw, which was the same time period.
Right. Interesting. Do you have a favorite play of all your plays, Judith?
It's like my children, you love them all. Well, except but Sled is the one child that causes you trouble, but you still love.
I kind of want to really read Sled now. I'm a bit
good things in it. Like and I had wonderful actors, beautiful actors, but it's just a big mess.
But so not a favorite. And do you have writers that inspire you?
All of them. I mean, I would hate to, all of the young writers coming up, the incredible work that they're doing. It's so wonderful that finally diversity is being embraced in race, gender, background, all of it. And I'm learning so much from them, as I did in our Rare's most recent show, Welcome to My Underworld, which featured nine writers from diverse emerging, and one was an 85-year-old emerging writer, and many were young, and I'm learning from them so much. And the gender revolution, for instance, so exciting, so much, so these pioneers, and I have students who are, gender pioneers, and I'm just have the great privilege of learning so much from them about the new world that has always been the world, but now we're finally seeing it, recognizing and acknowledging the truth of it.
For sure. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. You have been just amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you all. Thank you, Lindy, and thank you for listening.
All right. So everyone, I'm next week with one of Judith's oldest friends, Nancy Paul, which I'm really excited to, and a great admirer of hers as an actor and director. So it'll be fun to sit with her at the same time next Tuesday. And again, Judith, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.